gonna try out the new tripod here. So I went to a Christmas party for my wife and her job, and I made a Alfredo noodle, and apparently it was really good. Everybody was ranting and raving about it. So I decided today that I was going to show you how to make an Alfredo sauce. And the first key thing is to realize that Alfredo is a very, very simple thing. It only has a few ingredients. So you want to make sure you get some garlic. You want to make sure you have some heavy cream. And here's one of the kickers, is you want to make sure you spend the money and get Parmesan Reggiano. And it's the actual real Parmesan. It's not mixed with anything, because a lot of times your Parmesan's going to be mixed with other things like Asiago and whatnot. And then you want to make sure you get a good quality butter. These are your main ingredients right off the bat. Because there are so few of them, get the good ones, because you're going to really notice the difference in the end result. The really important thing is that the sauce is the sum of its parts, and there aren't very many parts, so you might as well go ahead and get the good stuff. So I've gone ahead and swung the camera down so you can see exactly what I'm working with here. And like I said, it's a very simple sauce. It's a very simple thing to make. First thing you want to do is get yourself some garlic and put it in the pan. And what you're going to do is you're going to make sure to brown a little bit of this over, because when you toast your garlic, it is in fact going to bring the flavor out. It's going to make it just so much better. It takes a little bit of the edge off the garlic as well. But definitely step one, always want to make sure to cook your garlic. Now this only takes like a minute or two to actually accomplish. In fact, I think I want to put more garlic. I'm going to double it, because I always end up adding more later anyway. But as we let this cook and simmer, yes, that's a lot of garlic. You will be fine. It's an entire pot. It's a sauce. Another thing about sauces, when you season a sauce, keep in mind that it's got to be able to hold up to whatever you're putting it on. So if you're going to pair it with something that's a little more strongly flavored, or if the sauce itself is just barely a coating, like in this case, it's going to have to carry the flavor. So you want that sauce to be a little bit more on the stronger side than what you would probably expect it to be, because it's going to get thinned out at serving. It smells fantastic. Now I've gone ahead and pulled it off the heat just so you can see and have a better idea of what I'm doing here. We don't need this anymore, so we can set this off to the side. And the next thing you want to do is put some butter in it. Now I'm going to use this Amish roll butter. It's nice and sweet, like a sweet cream. It does make a difference at the end. Proportionally, because I'm usually using about an entire thing, this is 1 quart of heavy cream, I've found out that more or less an entire stick of butter is where you want to be, at least for me. I know other sauces, recipes will say otherwise, but this is what seems to be working the best for me. So I will go ahead and just cut off a nice big chunk of that. That's about that's about 3/4 of a stick of butter. I'm just going to drop it right in there. And the idea is that you want to melt this butter, and you're going to use it also to brown the garlic just a little bit more. Now I've reduced the heat to about halfway. And the idea is that we just want to get enough that we can melt this butter and use it as kind of like a medium by which to scrape the bottom of the pan to get a lot of that garlicky goodness off the bottom. It's actually called fond. I don't know if you guys are fans of Binging with Babish, a gentleman named Andrew Ray. He talks about fond a lot. And even guys like Gordon Ramsay, they will always talk about how you want to scrape the pan and make sure that you get a nice brown color. This is going to contrast and darken up the sauce ever so slightly, because remember, we're dealing with cream. It's literally cream white. So that's what you want to do. Make sure that you get that in that beautiful brown color. And we're back on the heat. We got the heat turned down even lower. At this point, I'm going to start adding my cream. You want to add a little bit and go ahead and make sure you can somewhat get everything to join together. And you can see how the sauce, even though that garlic and butter was extremely brown, you can already see how it's really starting to lighten up just with the splash of cream that I put in it. Let's go ahead and add a bit more. And once again, we'll give it a good stir. We're just trying to bring everything together somewhat slowly. So there's our garlic and butter and cream, and It's a very rich sauce when it's done, and you're going to really enjoy it, and so will everybody else that you actually serve it to. There we go. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that when you do a sauce like this, you can see how watery it is. When you get to the point of tasting, that's when you start to modify things. So right now, we want that to be kind of watery, because as we add the cheese, it's going to start to thicken up, and you don't want to over thicken it, because as your sauce sits, it's going to thicken afterwards anyway. But we want to make sure that we have the correct amount of cheese in the sauce. My wife asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I told her I wanted a cheese grater with a handle on it, like they have at the Outback, or at the, Olive Garden. The old one I had was your typical, knuckle scraper like this, and I broke it. It was in like a plastic frame, and it was a single flat plane. It just wasn't very sturdy, and it was a little bit labor intensive. So for Christmas, I asked for this, and she definitely came through. This is a really nice one. I like that it's plastic and it disassembles. It's easier to clean that way. So the only downside to it is obviously you gotta remove the. Obviously, you got to downsize the size of the block of cheese that you're dealing with. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that into a couple of different pieces here and hope that it fits. Well, it barely fits. We'll go ahead and cut that one a little bit smaller. Now, some people just go ahead and grind the whole thing. I like to take the actual rind off the end of the cheese. That's just me personally. But now I got a couple of blocks that'll fit. And what you want to do is go ahead and start adding it to the sauce and mix it as you go. Here we go, grinding up the last little bit of cheese. This thing works fantastic. This was such a good gift. If you like Alfredo, get yourself one of these. I think she got it on Amazon. Freaking fantastic. Look at that. Say when I run out of cheese. Never say when. And that's all of it. Now see the sauce is actually starting to bubble a little bit, like boil. I'm going to reduce that heat just a touch. We really don't want to boil the sauce so much. Got it just above a simmer on the stove setting right now. That thing was awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and stir that in. Now, as I'm sure you probably already noticed, the sauce is rather watery. I mean, it's just barely enough to coat the back of a spoon right now. So, I mean, first inclination would be to add more cheese to kind of thicken it up. But you don't want to go there yet, because now we're about to get into the single most important part of the entire process. And that is simply tasting it. You have to taste your foods. This is something you'll hear Gordon Ramsay harp on. This is any good chef. Anybody other than Jamie Oliver with his, what was that, jelly, the chili jam or whatever it was. Oh, it's such a horrible idea. But definitely want to make sure that your sauce is a little bit on the thin side at this point, because now we're going to salt and pepper. And as we salt and pepper, you're going to increase the viscosity of the sauce. And it might be a little too high in a temperature here. I'm going to run it down to simmer, just above low. So let's give it a little taste right off the bat. Very cheesy. Cheese is on point. It is going to need a little bit more butter. The butter is going to add to the mouth feel of the sauce. You want it to kind of have more of a coating. It's almost a fatty feeling, to be honest with you. But you want it to have that sort of oily stickiness to it. That's what you'll get by adding more butter as you go through the process. First things first, I like to go for black pepper. If you've got a grinder, use it, because freshly ground black pepper always tastes better. Always. Not even a question. And I know I like a lot of pepper. My wife likes to put pepper on everything, including salads. So I'm going to put a lot of that in there until I got a good amount on top. Now as I stir it in, you just kind of got to have an eye for what you want it to look like. I want to be able to look into it and see the flakes of pepper in a certain concentration, if you will. Don't want it to be too sparse, but you don't want it to be too thick. And to me, that looks right about perfect, to be honest with you. It's something that I've just done a number of times. I know what I like. I don't know if you can see or not. Really isn't all that much pepper in there, but as we go through it, the pepper will actually cook into it and it'll bring that pepper flavor up. Much the same way as cooking your garlic did in the very beginning. Same thing. Salt. Now I'm using a pink Himalayan salt grinder. You can get these at your local store, pretty much anywhere. Kind of looking for that same basic concentration of flakes. So there's a lot more salt in this than you think. The pink Himalayan salt is nowhere near as strong as like your typical Morton salt that you see in the giant round containers like that. So you can add a bit more of this. It's a bit more forgiving in that regard. So, good amount of that. Give it a stir and constantly taste your sauce. So back to the spoon, give it a little stir. You can see somewhat of the grit in it maybe. The salt is on point. The only thing about this, when I say over salting, remember that the Parmesan is a rather salty cheese to begin with. So you want to make sure you don't over salt it, which is another good reason to use something like that, because it is not as strong. Now, in tasting it, I know already I need to add more garlic, which sounds odd, but it's the truth. Let it cook for a little bit more. Let's say we're pretty darn mixed, and we go immediately to the taste. Garlic brings a fullness to it, like a body to the flavor of it. Not so much the way it feels in your mouth, but just the actual flavor of it. I'm actually going to add a little bit more. And the key to it is just to keep tasting. Keep tasting it and keep adding a little bit here or there, and you're getting a rough idea how everything changes depending on what you add to it. Because your taste buds are the ultimate final test. Because it doesn't matter what it looks like or what amounts anything comes out to. What matters is, does it taste good? This tastes fantastic. A little bit more pepper. And we go back to the taste. First I'll give you a look. Looks good. That is fantastic. That really brings up it augments the taste of the body of it with the garlic. The salt just kind of adds a little shimmer on top, which is delicious. At this point, like I said, once we get to this point where everything tastes fantastic, I do want to change the feel of it in my mouth. It's a bit thin, it doesn't carry very far. Once you swallow it, it's just gone. There's no residual flavor, there's no coating feeling in the inside of your mouth. So I know what I need to do is add a little bit more milk fat in that regard, which is going to be done with butter. So I went a little light on the butter the first time. This is going to be the equivalency of what I should have added the first time plus a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and drop that right in. And this is going to be more than hot enough to melt that butter pretty quickly. And you can already see just right there that the sauce isn't splashing as much as it was. It's already starting to thicken up. And as you cook it, it'll also thicken. That is already dissolved. It's already gone. So we go back to the test. We go back to tasting your food. Taste your food. Make sure it tastes good. Don't serve anything to anybody you haven't tasted yourself. Much better. Much better. Maybe a little bit more butter. That's so good. Once again, another little sliver of butter that's really long, but it's really slim. I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in there. I'm gonna give that a good little stir. Not even splashing in the least at this point. It's definitely thickened up enough that it's going to be a lot more like a sauce than just a drizzle, if that makes sense. That is already melted in. Back to the test. And you can see, I just want you to see this. That really coats the spoon at this point. It really, really hangs on. That's what I was looking for. Because that's the same thing that'll do on the inside of your mouth. Beautiful. Oh, it's perfect. At this point, I'm gonna pull it off the heat. So now that I've got everything set, I've pulled it back off the heat over here. Now I pulled it off the heat because as it sits, it's going to get thicker. So being that dinner isn't for a couple of hours, I'm gonna let this sit. It's gonna get a little bit thicker. And then when my wife comes home, all I'll have to do is throw some pasta in a pot of boiling water, wait a little while for it to completely, cook all the way through. And then my sauce is ready to go right on top of some nice hot noodles. So in conclusion, buy good ingredients. Buy the best ingredients you can buy. Buy the good butter. Buy the real cheese that you have to grate yourself. Do not buy the one that's pre-grated. It doesn't taste the same. Grind your own spices if you can. Make sure, salt and pepper are musts. Everybody should have them in their own kitchen. Real garlic. I know I supplement with a little powdered garlic towards the end, but the biggest key factor to everything is buy good ingredients and taste your food. Season it to the way that you like it, because if you don't like it, nobody else will. You really want to serve something to somebody and they don't like it? It's a shot to your pride. Really sucks. I made this sauce for my wife's Christmas party with her job, and I showed up with basically doubling all the ingredients that you see here, tasting my sauce as I went, 2 pounds of pasta, and put it in a giant chafing dish aluminum pan, and it wasn't enough. Everybody went through it so quickly. Even the guy from Italy was like, wow, this is amazing. I was like, oh, thanks, man. Definitely a very good sauce. Very simple, very easy to do. Just keep it simple. It's really the biggest thing. So anyways, I'll catch up with you.